Welcome to Live, Breathe Yoga, a show dedicated to inspiring your practice and elevating your mind, body, and soul. Today on Case Study, we speak with Diane Bruni about the evolution of yoga. Coming up later in the show, get your mats ready for Strike a Pose, where we discover how to connect with a patient practice. Don't forget to stay tuned for Yoga Bites, where we share our recipe of the day. We have a great show in store for you today, so stay connected for more Live, Breathe Yoga. Mudra is the Sanskrit word for gesture and is used to deepen your awareness and concentration during your practice. It can involve a combination of asana, also known as postures, breathing techniques, locks, and visualization, or it can be as simple as a change in hand position. Muladhara Mudra is the gesture to allow for the opening of the root chakra. Touch your index finger and thumb together while resting the back of your hands to your knees as you sit in easy seated pose. Bring your awareness to the area at the base of your spine and find openness as you connect with your root chakra. Yoga has been around for thousands of years, so you can imagine how it might have been way back then. Well, even over the past 20 years, it's evolved, and I have with me today Diane Bruni to share with us about the evolution of yoga. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
So tell me about the evolution of yoga. What is it?
I'm living my life, and my life revolves around yoga, and it's changed a lot for me and what I practice and what I'm hearing the community expressing and talking about. So yoga, as we practice it in the West, is primarily focused on the actual postures, the asanas they're called. And we are very interested in the spiritual side of the practice and the philosophical side of the practice, but we all seem to, for the most part, focus on the physical, even though there is no separation between physical and spiritual. To me, it's all the same thing. And so but from how the physical practice is changing, the past 20 years in North America, huge changes have taken place.
And how do you think that began?
It started, I think the big yoga boom happened when Ashtanga yoga got popular. Ashtanga yoga is the most physical and challenging and demanding practice. And that was brought over to first California, then Hawaii, and then it started to spread into New York. Eventually we found it in Canada and Toronto.
You were the one that brought it to Canada.
I was the first one who started teaching Ashtanga in Toronto, and a friend of mine who was not living in Toronto, I didn't know him at the time, he has since become my friend. His name is Danny Paradise. He first learned it in Hawaii, so 35 years ago. So it's been passed on from person to person, and then all of a sudden it got huge really fast. And I think one of the reasons it became so popular so quickly is because Danny Paradise taught Sting. And then Madonna heard about it. So Sting and Madonna, the two biggest rock stars of the time, were promoting this form of yoga, and it probably would have taken off anyways, but I really feel that influence at that moment in time gave it a little spark, and it just, it's kind of like wildfire what happened. It just happened so fast, it seemed.
So you say wildfire, do you feel like it's kind of gone out of control now?
No, I don't think it's out of control. I think what's happened, it's become a very commercial practice. So it's like big business, and that will change how it evolves.
In terms of how you've seen it taught to the beginners back when you first brought it over.
Yeah.
And now that people kind of have an idea, people have seen the celebrity connection to the practice as well. Do you see that there's been a lot of change in how it's taught or how people connect to it?
There is a lot of change. I feel that when we started teaching this practice, everybody, well, it was easy too because everybody was a beginner.
Yeah.
So we had nothing but beginner classes at the beginning. But what's happened since then is that there are so many people who have gotten so good at it that it's actually really hard to find a beginner class anywhere. That most of the classes being taught in most of the studios are very challenging classes. They're very hard classes. So someone coming in who's never done those postures before, wow, no wonder so many people are being hurt doing yoga because they're not getting the solid foundation that could help to protect them from some injuries. But
So
that's a big story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that for people who aren't familiar with the practice of Ashtanga, if you're only practicing it once a week and you're connecting with these really intense poses, having not built up the daily practice, which is how you gain that strength,
Yeah.
that's where some of the injuries
Some
can
of the
come from.
injuries are coming from, people going too far too fast. And some of the injuries are coming from just actually getting too good at it and doing it too often.
Interesting.
Right?
Can you speak to that a little bit more?
That's what happened to me, and that's what I see happening to, people like me that have been doing it a long time. Is we loved it so much, and it was making us feel better and better and better that we just thought the more we did, the better we'd feel.
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to believe that, and we probably didn't want to admit that we were getting older.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're finding, what I've experienced was, I reached like a peak where I was doing some very advanced postures, but actually I wasn't feeling very good in my body because I had overstretched some of my joints, which made me vulnerable to injury.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what have you done within your own practice to remedy that?
I'm much more interested in building strength and also building resiliency and power into my body as opposed to just doing the poses at end range.
Mm-hmm.
Like they often refer to it as the full expression of the pose.
We hear this often.
We
yes.
hear that often. I don't actually like that expression anymore because that implies you're supposed to go to the end range of the pose,
That's a
which
good
for
point.
more people than not, especially once you can do the end range of the pose, doing it over and over again is actually what is not that great to do.
Like, where do you go after you've reached
Where
your
do
full
you go?
expression?
Well, typically
Yeah,
where we go is we want to do more extreme yoga poses.
Mm-hmm.
We want to do the next advanced poses. We want to do our intense vinyasa yoga in a hot studio because now we're going to get even hotter and sweat even more.
Is this desire for more just really something that's relative to the North American culture? Did you find that this desire for more, achieving more is something that's found anywhere else?
I'm not sure what's happening anywhere else. I wish I could speak to that, but I really don't know. I've heard some interesting stories about how yoga is practiced in the East, but I don't even really want to comment on that because I'm not, I don't know enough.
Okay.
But I know what's happening here
Okay.
in this part of the world, and it's, there definitely seems to be some sort of race and some sort of, it's become much more of a, I don't want to say competition, but a little bit of a competition where people think that more is better and that if I go more often and I do more poses and I do the deeper poses, I'm going to get better and better at yoga and that's going to make me a better person. The problem is people are overstretching their joints if all they do is yoga.
Right. So would you recommend other practices or other styles of yoga maybe?
I really think the key to longevity and sustainability is diversity. So doing the same thing every single day, it doesn't matter what it is, whatever the motion, whatever the repetitive motion is, you do it all the time, every day, you have a much higher risk of being injured.
Where do you see the evolution of yoga going from here?
The evolution of yoga is going to be an ongoing, I don't think this form will evolve into another form and it's going to be that. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think because of how we are sharing our experiences in this cross-cultural world that we live in, especially in a place like Canada, where there are so many people from so many different parts of the world and so many people from so many different areas of knowledge who are practicing yoga now, meaning physiotherapists, doctors, biomechanical experts, all these people who are doing yoga themselves and analyzing what we're doing in yoga and helping us, the yoga teachers, understand how we can make it safer. So I think we need to listen to the feedback, listen to the research, be aware of what's happening in the community, and begin to create practices that are modified so that we can avoid a whole lot of injuries just by modifying the practice a little bit. But that seems to be a huge big deal for a lot of people.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think people are very attached to this is yoga, and this, well, that's, some people say that's not a yoga pose. Some people say like high lunge, for example. Some people would say high lunge is not actually a yoga pose, that because it has to be heel down. So there's a lot of resistance to change, and people get attached. People want
Change
to believe.
is difficult, though.
People want to believe that what they're doing, that tradition, goes back thousands of years, and it's been this way for so long, and it worked for them, and it's working for me, and it's going to keep working for me. But in reality, there's a lot of controversy about how far back the tradition actually goes. Okay. And from my experience, I saw what we were teaching 30 years ago, and we're making new poses up every single day.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're making it up.
Yeah.
We all did it as yoga teachers teaching all the time. We're making stuff up based on what we've taken from what looks like traditional yoga, and we went to the gym and we did some work with a personal trainer, and we learned, some interesting techniques to stay strong.
Right.
Or we're a gymnast and we're interested in gymnastics, or we did gymnastics as a kid. A lot of yoga, what we think is traditional yoga actually was very much influenced by gymnastics. Mm-hmm. So why would we cut that off? Like why? So a lot of yoga teachers are bringing some of those principles into their yoga classes. Dancers are bringing more dance-like principles into the yoga classes because it feels right, and it feels healthy for the body to move in different ways. So I think what will happen is that people will begin to expand their vision of what can be yoga.
So do you think that with the evolution of yoga, certain traditional practices will eventually become negated? Or do you think that it's important to maintain these traditions so people know where they came from?
Yeah, I think that there will always be certain people who will hold on to the tradition, and they'll be like the gatekeepers. They're taking care of that, and they're going to practice it that way, and there will always be that element, right? And those traditions, I do. Yeah. I do, because I think that every tradition has something incredibly valuable to offer, and there's something there for everyone. Mm-hmm. And that certain, like the Ashtanga tradition, for example, which is beautiful. Many people are being healed. Many people are being healed by that method of practice. But the key is to know when it's right for you and when it's not right for you. And if you're not being healed, if you're finding that too many of those poses are hard on your knees, for example, you have to acknowledge that. Your teacher needs to acknowledge that, help you acknowledge that, and let you go.
Yes.
And often what happens is...
letting go is another big thing that's
a really hard thing. So
Yeah.
teachers get attached to students, students get attached to their teachers and the tradition that they're practicing, and they keep practicing even when it's hurting them. because it's hard to let go. I was like that, so I speak from experience. It was hard for me to let go. It was hard for me to admit that my practice was actually injuring my body, and I had to change.
So you say you were like that. What happened that allowed you to open up and look elsewhere?
Unfortunately, and I sort of see this happening a lot in the community, is that for me it took 2 very significant injuries to go. I had to go, like after the second one, I went, okay, what's wrong with this picture? How could that have happened to me? And then I understood how it happened.
Did you have support when it happened, or was it something that you really went into, or were there people that you can speak to about it?
It was a very lonely and difficult time for me, because when I realized that it was my yoga practice that caused the injury, and that's what I was teaching every single day of my life, and I had a big studio, and I had promoted it and like sold it, and like I so believed in it. Then when I realized, I can't keep doing this to myself anymore. What am I going to do now? It was a really difficult, it was a number of years. It's still difficult for me, but I'm better now because I'm talking about it, and I feel that that's what I personally need to do. I can't bury it, and I can't not talk about it, because I know that there's a lot of other people who are having these same experiences, and we need to talk about it so that we can change it. So
you don't have that feeling of being alone when you're going through the injury.
Exactly. And so that we can come together as a community and begin to recreate what it looks like, what yoga classes could look like, and how that could protect people and save people from unnecessary injury. So much of what's happening is unnecessary. It's just based on, we have this idea that it has to look a certain way, so we're doing certain movements over and over again that are creating an imbalance in our bodies.
So it's all about balance.
It's all about balance. And you can balance it out by not doing yoga every day, right? So you could balance it out by going to the gym every other day, or riding your bike every other day, or doing other activities, other sports every other day. Then you're probably good. I think the main problem is for people who only do yoga every day. And I, as a yoga teacher and studio owner, I used to tell people not to go to the gym.
Yes.
Because
it's part of the tradition.
And not to go to the gym. So many people stopped going to the gym because of me, because they wanted to get good at yoga, and you'll get better at yoga if you don't go to the gym, because you'll get more flexible faster. And that's exactly what causes the injuries. So it's a bit of a dilemma. Yeah. So now what I'm finding is that a lot of yoga teachers are starting to not only change what they teach in the classes, but they're also starting to add different classes to their schedule, to their studios.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so that's totally inspiring.
Small movements. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's a lot's happened in the past 2 years. Okay. So I'm so inspired to see, more functional movement classes, natural movement classes. People just want to come to yoga. This is my feeling. Most people want to come to yoga. They're looking to feel better in their bodies, and they want to learn how to move well. Right? They want to improve their posture and just be able to move in a more healthy, natural way throughout the rest of their life.
Yes.
So that's why I think these functional movement and natural movement trends will begin to gain more momentum. And that's where I got the idea for the Yoga in Motion class that I've been teaching.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll get to see that. At the end of the day, the evolution of yoga is all about balance.
It's all about balance and allowing for change, allowing for the evolution. It's about really paying attention to not only what you're feeling, but also what the community is saying. It's about teachers communicating with one another and listening to, what the bigger community is saying, so that we're informed.
Amazing. Well, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so
Diane.
much. My pleasure.
Coming up after the break, strike a pose. Stay connected. pose, we are sharing postures along with modifications so that you can practice safely at home or at the studio. We're gonna start today with tree pose. In tree pose, you're taking one foot to your inner calf or your inner thigh. One of the things you want to be very mindful of is not to take your foot to your inner knee, because that will push your knee in a weird direction that it's not naturally going to. Gently drawing your hands to heart center. In this pose, draw your awareness to your supporting leg. You want to find length lifting up out of that hip. Sometimes we hang out in our hips, so think of lifting to the top of your head and rooting into all 3 points of your supporting foot. You're gonna actively press your foot into your leg and your leg back into the foot as you actively open up your knee to the side. Now from here, what I like to practice with my students is a little exercise with closing your eyes. So what I'm gonna get Kate and Lee to do is find their focal point, find the drishti, and imagine that focal point in your mind as you close your eyes. So when closing your eyes, it starts to take away that depth perception. So it really helps to envision that image in your head. And falling out of the pose is totally normal, and the awareness starts to be drawn to your calf, your ankle, your feet, and how you press into that foot. And it almost fires off all of those accessory muscles in your leg. Yeah, it's challenging. It's definitely challenging. And then gently from here, if you need to open your eyes every once in a while, that's just a fun little exercise that I like to add on to a tree pose. And you can almost really feel how much fired up that leg is now in comparison to how it would be if your eyes were open. From here, we're gonna move into our next standing balancing posture, which is Ardha Chandrasana. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get both Kate and Lee to utilize a block. Now, for some of you, you might have a block at home that you can utilize to help bring the floor closer to you. So I'm gonna pass that to Kate. Now, if you don't have a block, you can actually take some firm books, hardcovers, and stack them, and then just use a piece of thread or ribbon to create a homemade block. So I'm gonna give this to Lee, and he can select whatever height he would like to work with. So either low, medium, high. So connecting with your Ardha Chandrasana. So I'll let both Kate and Lee connect with it at their own pace. And from here, you can start to see that the help of the block, bringing the block closer to the hand, allows for the alignment in the body. So you're flexing your extended foot, flexing your pinky toe towards your outer thigh, and think of stacking your hips, stacking your shoulders. If it's available to you, maybe draw your gaze up to the sky. You don't have to. You can keep your gaze to the earth as well. If you find that you're teetering in this pose, you can bring the block on the highest height, and that'll take you the floor closer to you. So Lee, I'm gonna get you to demonstrate what that would look like. So taking the block to the highest height. Beautiful. And what can happen too in this pose is maybe you're not able to extend your supporting leg, so even bending this knee slightly so you can find this nice length from your heel to the top of your head. And those are our standing balancing postures that you can add to your home practice or have the modifications for when you connect with it at the studio. Remember, with a patient practice, you can connect with your version of your pose at your own pace. I want to thank Lee and Kate for being with me today. Coming up next, Yoga Bites. Namaste. Agya, the third eye chakra, meaning command. This is a delicious take on pancakes. A simple substitution of flour with coconut flour gives your breakfast a tropical feel. Mix the dry and wet ingredients in separate bowls Then stir the wet mixture into the dry until they all blend together without lumps. Use a serving spoon or ladle to portion your pancakes into the pan. Cook on low to medium heat. Serve with berries, banana, or syrup, and enjoy. Remember, if you have a favorite recipe, or maybe there's a technique that you'd like us to try out on the show, feel free to share it with me on my Facebook page at Kaye.yoga. Stay tuned for more Live Breathe Yoga. Namaste.